Hello, I'm Death's Arrow, and welcome to What I'm Thinking, episode number 1. In this episode, I will be focusing on the mighty Ferdinand Tank Destroyer. The Ferdinand, or Ferdy as I affectionately call it, is one of my favorite vehicles in World of Tanks. It has the second most powerful gun on a Tier 8 tank, artillery not included, and is an extremely effective vehicle in the right hands. The Ferdy's playstyle is a bit different from the majority of tank destroyers in World of Tanks, which I will explore to a certain extent in this episode. From a historical perspective, the Ferdinand was built on the chassis of the failed Porsche Tiger. As you'll see in game, the Tiger P and Ferdy have the same hull. According to some reports, there are discrepancies in-game between the lengths of the two tanks, and supposedly the Tiger P has a longer hull. Historically, the Ferdy carried the 8.8cm L71 gun, otherwise known as the Long 88 in-game. The Ferdy first saw combat at the Battle of Kursk in 1943. Reportedly, the Ferdy was able to knock out T-34 tanks at a range greater than 3 miles. While the Ferdy was effective against Soviet armor, it lacked anti-personnel capability and was vulnerable to infantry attack, although most Ferdys lost during Kursk were due to mechanical failures and mine damage. After the Battle of Kursk, most of the surviving Ferdys were modified by adding a ball-mounted MG-34 in the front hull to improve anti-infantry capability, a commander's cupola to improve vision, and the application of Zemrit paste to protect the vehicle from magnetic anti-tank mines. The modification was called the Elephant. The Elephant pack typically denotes a pack of heavy tanks, but works for a pack of Ferdys as well. In World of Tanks, the Ferdy is death on tracks. While in the stock configuration, the Ferdy mounts the somewhat underwhelming 8.8cm L71 gun, the Elite Ferdy mounts the 12.8cm L55. On a Tier 8 tank, this gun is very potent, and as noted earlier, is the second most powerful gun that can be mounted on a Tier 8 tank, not including arty. Also, to be noted, the Ferdy isn't particularly maneuverable in the stock configuration. Once the tracks and engine are upgraded, the Ferdy, while still a bit sluggish, is reasonably maneuverable. Although, if you're not careful, light and medium tanks can flank or pin you, which generally leads to a dead Ferdy, unless you have competent backup. What you're seeing now is my Ferdy, fully upgraded. Please note the equipment I have mounted. While there are numerous options, this configuration works best for my playstyle. I mount an enhanced gun laying drive so I can aim faster, a rammer so I can get off more shots, and binoculars for enhanced view distance, as well as being able to see and accurately fire upon targets over 500 meters away. While I do fire occasionally on the move with my Ferdy, it's only at close range. Generally speaking, I fire from static positions. For crew skills, I recommend repair as the most important, then camo, firefighting last. This is the opposite from what I usually recommend for tank destroyers. Usually you want to do camo first, then repair, which is what I did as I ground up the German tank destroyer line, but you really need repair on the Ferdy. You'll get tracked often as the tracks are pretty exposed, and a tracked tank destroyer is usually a dead tank destroyer. Getting the tracks repaired quickly will improve your survival. Once the 7.2 patch is introduced, I plan to revisit the crew skill options. The Ferdinand has fairly thick armor on the front, listed at 200mm, but the armor has very little slope to it. To enhance the armor, I suggest angling the front of your Ferdy about 10 to 15 degrees to try to get shells to bounce. Much like most German vehicles in game, the side and rear armor are much thinner, and you generally do not want to present that armor to the enemy if you can avoid it. My playstyle with the Ferdy is aggressive, but reasonably cautious. The Ferdy, unlike most other tank destroyers in World of Tanks, isn't very stealthy. It's tall and it's large, thus it has a low camo value. Rather than playing a static camping type style, I tend to use my Ferdy as an assault vehicle. There's nothing wrong with camping, by the way, it's just not my preferred way to play, as I like to dictate the pace of combat. So, I pick my spots and push on the enemy forces. Knowing when and where to push is the more cautious aspect of how to play the tank. You don't want to push into lights and mediums, as they can easily flank you and have shots at your weaker side and rear armor. A T-50-2 at close range is any Ferdy driver's worst nightmare, as the combination of speed and agility can easily outmaneuver and kill a Ferdy. The replay that we'll be looking at next is a solo battle from March 17, 2012 on Erlenberg. The first thing to look at is what map you're dealing with. In this case, it's Erlenberg. Not my favorite map, but it does have decent cover and sniping locations. The tough thing with this map is that it's hard to pre-predict enemy movements, as there aren't any special areas where certain tanks tend to gravitate to, and this map plays differently almost every time out. We'll find out which side of the map we're on in a moment. Next, you should review the composition of each team. Is there arty? Does the enemy team have scouts that need to be dealt with? Does one team have more mediums than the other, etc.? In this case, my Ferdy is top tier, the enemy team has weak arty that I won't be particularly worried about, Both teams have the same number of tier 8s, but my team has no tier 7s. My team has a better RD piece in the Hummel. Something else I noticed, my team has more premium top tiers, which can be troublesome but not necessarily so, although KV5 drivers tend to be subpar in general. The other thing to review is if you notice any familiar names or clans. This is based on experience. If you know there's a quality player in your team, you should make sure you support them. If they're on the other team, you should make sure you try to kill them. No one stands out to me in particular in this battle. Now that the map is loaded, I'm on the west side positioned near the south bridge. Not really where I want to be at the start of this match. As a top tier tank, you want to be where the enemy top tiers are, so you can engage and destroy them. So I head towards the castle courtyard to wait and see how things develop. Unless you have a planned position you want to get to, hanging back for a minute or two is a good way to feel things out and decide where you need to be in the battle, like an uncovered flank. I've now reached the castle courtyard. There are a couple of good sniping positions in this area, although they are exposed to arty if spotted. In this position, I'm overlooking my team's cap and notice two heavy tanks across the river, one of which is a Tiger II, which is a priority target for me. Both heavies are behind solid cover, and I can't hit either of them from my current position. I've noticed that 6 tier 6 and lower tanks are on the northern flank and appear to be getting ready to push the northern bridge. With a good portion of the team covering the southern flank and no imminent push across the center, I decide to support the northern push by getting on top of the ridgeline. The northern force spots a Jagdpanther, which I get a nice flank shot for the kill.
Gotcha.
The northern group then begins to push the bridge. I wait a little bit to see if they run into anything nasty before I begin my push along with them, as they only spot a slugger. As I push to the northern bridge, I've been watching the minimap and noticed that there's an engagement occurring at H9. Based on what I'm seeing, it appears that our team's tier 8s have been engaging the enemy's tier 8s, and our tier 8s are losing the battle. At this point, I know I've technically gone to support the wrong flank. This goes against my philosophy of being in position of engaging the enemy's top tiers, and when the second load dies, I know I need to get a move on, or the southern flank will be crushed. I turn south into town and try to push hard to get into position to continue to support the northern push, as well as hopefully get a line on the southern forces. As I get to the center of town, both enemy arty as well as a Tiger II get spotted.
Enemy armor is destroyed. Enemy vehicle destroyed. That got hurt.
I notice the enemy has crossed the southern bridge, not a good sign, as they have no tier 8 supporting them. After cleaning out the center, I turn my attention to the Tiger II on the hill. He's a critical target, as knocking out that tank gives us control of the enemy cap. I push hard on the Tiger, knowing that he has little to no support based on what I'm seeing on the minimap. Partway up the hill, I notice the enemy T-29, which I turn to engage and get a kill shot on just as he disappears from view. Take those shots when you can, especially if you notice that the enemy isn't moving when you last spotted them. As I crest the hill, the Tiger II is nowhere in sight, but a Stug 3 is spotted and quickly dispatched. The Tiger II now appears. I turn to engage him and quickly dispatch him. I've been watching the minimap during the encounter with the Tiger II and see that the southern flank is able to hold its own. With just a T-44 remaining, we move to cap the enemy base in case defenders can't stop the T-44. Capping is insurance in this situation. We cap the base quickly for the win before the T-44 can be destroyed. Looking at the victory screen, I made top gun, but experience-wise, it was a less than impressive victory, as most of my shots were killing blows at low hit point targets. A win is a win though, and 6 kills is still impressive enough. I also didn't take any damage from the enemy. Surviving battles, especially without taking damage, will put a good amount of credits in your pocket. Overall, I made a pretty major tactical mistake by going north. If the southern flank defenders weren't competent, that match could have certainly turned out differently. Always keep an eye on the minimap. By doing that, I knew I had to push hard from the north bridge because time was of the essence. Backtracking south from where I was located when things started going bad in the south wasn't a plausible option. Plus, I would have been abandoning the northern attack, which likely would have stalled without my gun. Thank you for watching this episode of What I'm Thinking. Stay tuned for another episode soon. I plan to continue to explore the Ferdinand in the next episode.